Hi everyone, my name is Piyush. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at MathCo. Welcome to the AI Blueprint, a series about the playbooks, the people, and patterns driving AI and analytics success in organizations. For this episode, I am thrilled to have Ujjwal join us for this conversation. Ujjwal is a dear friend and a fantastic customer and a great visionary leader in our space. Ujjwal heads all HR analytics at Mars Inc. And I believe that he has built something remarkable that has been overlooked in the industry. And his team is probably one of the founding teams of what is going to be very mainstream as the future of AI unfolds. Ujjwal, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me over.
First things first, can you tell us what led you to a career in HR analytics? How did you get here and how has it been since you've been pursuing this?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So, honestly, I'm not traditionally an HR analytics person. I've been doing data analytics all my professional life, but never looked at people analytics or HR analytics as a competency or, something that I could do. This was a very interesting challenge that was presented to me about 3 years back where, Mars was just beginning their journey around people analytics. It was at a very nascent stage. It was really around, we do some basic reporting, but we really want to up that in terms of the maturity and take it forward. And I thought that was a very interesting challenge to have. Seemed very greenfield based on the little research I was able to do. I saw that not many organizations, firstly, were doing people analytics. And even those that were really at a very nascent stage, that some were doing very, very basic things. Some were doing a little bit more advanced, but, there was no clear process or maturity as such that existed, as a function within organizations. So I thought it was an interesting challenge. And I said, let's try it and see what I can do.
I do think that what you guys have been building is extremely remarkable.
Thank you.
That has been overlooked by the industry so far. And I do think that this is soon going to become very mainstream as the AI future unfolds. So kudos to you guys for making that happen.
Thank you. Again, and you're right? Because what's critical or central to any organization? It is their people. And if you do not really leverage the data to help make the life of their people or their associates better, then you're really not serving your main customer, which is your employee. So I do agree it's core and it's the future.
Yeah. See, one of the things that we want to achieve through this series is to educate people, our audience, about some of these areas and make sure that as they pursue their careers in HR analytics or a function similar to that, they learn about it. So my next question is for you to just define what HR analytics is. Please demystify that for us and everybody else.
I can give you the Mars definition that we are using in terms of people analytics. But I think it's very much aligned with where the industry is. When you talk about people analytics is, understanding an associate or an employee from the moment they've actually applied for a role in your organization to the moment they either leave or retire, and then everything in between. And people analytics is really around leveraging that journey through the associate's life cycle that you can then help draw the right insights and bring the right mitigations or interventions that can actually improve the associate's experience with the company. Many organizations really do annual surveys, and that's all they do, and they consider that as people analytics. That is just a part of once the associate is already on board. But what happens about the candidate who's applied? How have they felt? How encouraged were they to, go through the process? Did it help them or not? Were they motivated after the interview process to even continue working, or, would really look forward to working for the organization or not? Companies don't pay a lot of attention to that. That's really what we are doing from a Mars standpoint, which is looking at that entire life cycle and then understanding each life stage and then what interventions and mitigations we can bring in that.
Yeah. See, that's so important to be able to focus on an associate's well-being. And I think you also said it that companies don't necessarily focus on that enough. But I've seen that you guys have been able to focus on it, make investments. There's a lot of alignment from your leadership. How did you make that happen?
Yeah, no, so firstly, I think it's kudos to our leadership at Mars, where, they clearly saw that this was an area and an opportunity that we were really not tapping or maximizing. And we really wanted to make an impact there. For us, the associate, as I mentioned, is the most critical asset that we have at Mars. And we want to make sure that, the associate really has a true and meaningful career at Mars. So the investments really just came purely based on making sure that we understand our associates' data and we can then bring in the right interventions to make their life easier at Mars. As part of that, again, it's been a journey. As I mentioned, we started with very, very basic reporting, but then as we built this maturity and capability, we really understood that there are a lot more problems that we could actually use the same data to solve and make our associates' life easier and better. And that's really what we've been driving.
Yeah. And there is something about the culture at Mars and associate friendliness that probably has a role to play here as well. I also noticed that you guys do not use the word HR or human resources, but you use the word people and people analytics.
Yep.
Can you tell me something about that?
Absolutely. So, when we look at the people function within Mars, it is really about people and organization. And as I mentioned, associate is core to it. We are a family-owned business, and as part of that, the associate concept is something that we truly, truly value at Mars. And the associate is critical in everything that we do. All our policies, everything is centered around the associate. So for us, it was a no-brainer in terms of what should really be the name, and it was really people analytics. Because it is about the associate, it is about making the associate's life better, and all the data that we have pertains to the associate.
Yeah. See, we talked about the organization alignment, a broader definition of HR analytics and people analytics, as you call it. Let's talk about what happens when rubber hits the road, right? So when you think about various capabilities that you have built in this space for this company over the last few years, how would you tell others to think about it? What is the right way to think about the right sequence, the right focus areas? What are those capabilities that somebody should build?
That's a great question. And, again, based on what we see in this industry and, what organizations are doing, a lot of the organizations, that are of similar size to Mars or even smaller, what we see is the core data, which is central to everything that you do from an analytics standpoint, generally sits in the IT organization. And the IT organization is determining what goes in and what data would come into that ecosystem as such. And I think that's fundamentally a problem because the people analytics team is closest to the problem, and that's a capability that should actually sit within the people analytics team. At Mars, that's really what we shifted. Traditionally, this was the same model where this was sitting in the IT organization, but we brought it under the people analytics umbrella, and it's actually been a game changer because we've been able to be very deliberate and conscious in terms of what data do we use and how do we get that into this ecosystem. That's the more foundational pillar that's really needed as you build this capability. The second capability is really around the analytics side of it, the data science, as well as the data engineering that you really need to do to solve the problem. So I think that's the second pillar that we've brought in or is important in the people analytics space. The third pillar, which is very, very critical, is what we call the engagement pillar. This is really someone who are functional experts who are working with critical stakeholders within the business to help identify a problem, in many cases frame the problem also, because many times the business struggles around articulation of the problem statement itself, and then work with the data science and the data engineers to actually create a solution. But the work doesn't stop there. The engagement team then also takes the output and helps the business around the consumption of that. What decisions do they make? How do they actually use what's being created? And then what interventions or mitigations they can bring into that. So that's really the third pillar that is critical and is needed as part of the people analytics. And the fourth, in many cases, is really around the what I would like to call the consumption or the art of the possible. Many times, the organizations, especially even, we struggled that was, what's my next big problem? How do I even identify that? Rather than playing catch up, how can I actually start bringing in elements for the future and start looking at how can I actually embed that into the processes today and then solve for them. And I think that's also a critical capability that needs to be sitting under the people analytics.
Absolutely. And these four are not necessarily sequential. You have to build the foundation, but you don't wait to finish the foundation while you work on value creating problems. At the same time, you don't jump onto solving many different problems without having the foundation in place.
Yep. And at Mars, we've actually followed very similar concepts, right? So we've said, let's build and solve your problem while the backend still catches up.
Mm-hmm.
So if we went the other way, we would be spending years to really build a fantastic backend, but we would have solved nothing. So, our approach has been very, very similar, which is to say, how do I take what I have and quickly solve and then embed that into the backend so that I can sustain it and scale it at the level that we really want to.
Yeah. And see, at MathCo, we use this analogy of the supercharged brain that, one should pursue to make your organization, similar to a supercharged brain. What we mean by that is there are 4 different components that make a supercharged brain real. One is having access to clean information, which is the foundation that you talked about. The second bit is encoding all of the information in the form of decision products, which we build many, many of. And the third bit is being able to rapidly respond to business questions. And fourth is innovation. Now, all those 4 need to kind of work together to be able to achieve that supercharged brain state, if you will. Now, I know we were talking about this morning, and this whole thought process of the left brain thinking and the right brain thinking came up. Can you share with the audience what your thought is about the two coming together?
Sure. Again, if you look at the left brain, it is really more around the analytical and the problem solving capability. While if you really look at right brain thinking, it is really more around, what's possible. How can I actually design for that? And how can I actually be more creative? So the right side of the brain is bringing creativity, while the left hand side of the brain is really more on the analytical side of it. And I'll just use a very simple example because this is really where your left brain and your right brain has to come to play, right? I might build a fantastic analytical solution. Let's talk about a predictive model, and I might build a fantastic predictive model. But if I cannot explain that to my business, no matter how good that model might be, no matter what it might be predicting, if the business doesn't understand it or doesn't know how to use it, they're not going to use it, right? So for us, that creativity of making it simple and easy for the business to use is really that right brain thinking. And it comes together beautifully where you build a fantastic analytical product and I build a fantastic consumption layer on top of it that makes it easy for the business to use.
Yeah.
And that's the right brain and left brain thinking.
Absolutely. And you know that we've been investing significantly in our design capabilities and making sure that we bring that creativity. Of course, knowing Python and machine learning and algorithms is important, but at the same time, bringing that other element which you call right brain is also important to bring when you create solutions and when you create.
Exactly. And that consumption layer is really what the end user sees.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really understand what's under the hood, right? They really don't understand the algorithm or the model that was used or machine learning or any of that. All they see is the front end, right? And they really are only interacting and interfacing with that. But if it's not simple and user friendly, guess what? No one's going to use it.
Yeah. See, we talked about the broad alignment, the vision, and the definition of HR analytics. We talked about the actual execution and the capabilities that you have to build. I want to pivot towards talking about value and impact of the work that gets done. We have started calling our case studies actually as impact stories. It's not just a change in name, but a cultural change in how our folks think about work being done and the impact that's get created for the customers. It's extremely important that whatever we create gets consumed in the right way and there is value generated out of it. When you think about HR analytics and impact created because of the work that you and your team is doing, how does it shape up at Mars?
Absolutely, and you're right. Everything that you're doing, at least from a data analytics standpoint, you're doing it to create an impact. Now, impact by itself, varies based on who's using it. Right? For some people, getting information in a timely, easy to consume manner creates impact for them. Whereas for a more advanced problem, it is really around how can I actually tie what I see to a business problem and how am I actually using that is creating impact. Let me take an example and explain what I mean by that, right? So let's talk about, an organization, and an organization is aiming to double their sales. And, when you start looking at, all right, what would it take to double my sales? Well, you need more people. Now, all right, I need more people. How do I, plan for what that would really look like? That's really where people analytics now comes into play. How, when, where is really the impact that is getting created that is actually adding to that top line of achieving your sales to double from what it is today. That's really what P&O is doing. And for us, that impact creation is happening in every conversation that we have with our business. We are present in every meeting that the business has because that's a key input into every decision that we make. And that's the impact that we are making.
Yeah. And we always educate our teams that any asset that you're creating and any analytical asset should lead to a few decisions that business can make, which should allow for certain outcomes to be achieved. So the outcomes, decisions, and assets kind of go hand in hand together, and we think about all of it holistically. Only then impact gets created.
That's correct.
See, no conversation around AI is complete without talking about generative AI, right? So in terms of, we all know that there's so much buzz and hype around generative AI altogether. But what do you think about what is real today, especially in the context of HR analytics?
Yeah, you're right. Gen AI is ever evolving, ever changing. You're hearing about new capability almost every other day. And I think organizations need to be a little bit more responsible as they look at implementing generative AI, especially in the HR space, because at the end of the day, what the HR space is doing is they're dealing with their associate data. And you've got to be super careful in terms of you don't want it to be, compromised in any form or fashion. Generative AI today in the HR space can actually be used in various areas. One of the big things where I think generative AI is more widely being used in this space is really around understanding policies and regulations that might impact an associate or an employee. It's no longer where the associate is calling the head desk to find out how many leaves they are eligible for or, the duration of their maternity leave going forward. All of this can quickly be answered through generative AI. And I think that's just one classic example of a use case where generative AI and HR is being present. But if you really start looking at the maturity of that, which has really not been done extensively, is how do I actually use generative AI in conversations that I can have with associates around workforce planning, for example? Or how can generative AI be very, very prescriptive in helping a business partner have a more meaningful conversation with an associate who's more likely to leave an organization? So I think that's really use cases where you could actually start leveraging generative AI, where it gives you enough information that helps you in that decision making, but also gives you the right prompts at the right time and enough data points that you could then leverage as you have that conversation. So I think that's really where the future of generative AI is in the HR space.
Got it. This brings me to my last question, which is, do you think AI can replace humans?
Uh, that's a great question. And I don't think AI can replace, humans. It can augment what humans do. It definitely means that humans will have to adapt as AI becomes more centric to our day-to-day lives. But it's really building new skills and capabilities that really the humans will have to start, bringing in their skill set. I'll give you two examples of why I say that. Right today, if anybody says when they start talking about AI, it's really about Terminator, and Terminator is going to show up at my door. Well, I always say, if Terminator ever shows up at your door, just close the front door. That's literally what and you're safe. Terminator can't do anything. So that's just a simple example of where generative AI or AI gets augmented through the human capability rather than it taking over human capability. But similarly, if I take the hype or the fear around AI, I'm going to take you back about 60, 70 years back. 70 years back, when calculator was introduced, there was a fear, especially among the teachers, around the calculator is actually going to take away the teachers' jobs. All the math teachers would actually lose their jobs because the calculator had become mainstream. Did it really replace the teachers? Not really. The students became more clever in terms of how they could actually use the calculator to use that for solving complex mathematical problems, but it never really replaced the teacher. The humans adapted, and AI is almost at that same level, where AI is where the calculator was 50, 60 years back. It's only going to help us make our lives easier, but we will have to build new skills in terms of how we use it.
Yeah, I do have similar views, but thanks a lot, Ujjwal, for being with us today. Hopefully, our audience will take a few learnings out of this conversation. Thanks a lot for being very authentic and candid.
Thank you.
Really good to have you.
Thank you very much.